Hey guys, my name is Georgia and I'm the Publicity Officer for the African Caribbean Society at the University of Exeter.
My name is Kankam-Nantwi. I am the president of the Feminist Society and I'm also a law student at the University of Exeter.
Hi, I'm Joy and I was the president of Soul Choir from 2019 to 2020.
Hi, my name is Leila and I'm part of Legion Dance Society. I'm going to be contemporary fusion coach for Legion next year, and I'm speaking as a mixed race girl, having grown up in Britain for most of her life.
Hey, it's Marion again, and today's topic is calling out in culture. Now, something that people can do that is harmful to the BIPOC community, firstly, is by denying racism exists in the 21st century. And if you don't know the term BIPOC, this acronym stands for Black, Indigenous People of Colour. And I would recommend you get to know that term because it's becoming much more used and prevalent in the media.
The things that are most harmful to community are kind of just done out of ignorance and just like a lack of understanding of how to address stuff. You know, Black people don't want you to pretend that you can't see their skin colour, and that's why you're treating them the same as everybody else. They want you to see their skin colour, but to still treat them as everybody else. You know, it's not a pretend that we're white, it's just we are Black and this is the way we are, and that doesn't mean and shouldn't mean anything different for the way that we're treated.
By saying things like, slavery was abolished, so racism doesn't exist, and the Jim Crow laws were abolished, and by comparing the past where things like slavery and segregation was legal to now when it's obviously not, it's very harmful and it minimizes Black people's hardships that they have to go through every single day.
So one thing that white people and even non-Black people of color do sometimes to Black people is dismiss us when we are saying something is racist. As a Black person, I have more experience with anti-Black racism than you do. So assume that if I say something is racist, that I know what I'm saying. You don't need to tell me that I took it the wrong way or that you're a good person or that you didn't mean it that way, because that's irrelevant. The fact is that you did something that was insensitive and you should apologize and correct it. And not only correct yourself, but correct other people around you so that Black people don't have to keep on explaining their humanity to other people over and over again.
And another thing is that racism does not always have to be in its most extreme forms every single time. And the word has been corrupted in society today. It's been distorted to make people overlook daily racism because they feel like it is only extreme racism that is racism. No matter the intensity, racism is wrong and can never be acceptable. To call somebody out is to expose them. In this case, talking about racism, to expose someone when they say something racist and help them understand what they have said or done is racist, and by questioning why they have said or done the thing.
I can't say that I ever feel equipped to call out racism because it's never something that I want to do. You know, I don't want to have to call out racism, I don't want to have to be in those situations, but often I am. And I don't know if it's so much being equipped to call it out as just to understand that it's your duty and your responsibility to call it out no matter how it makes you feel. Because you never know, you calling out might just bring about that small change that creates big change. So I think you don't have to feel equipped to call out racism. Often I don't. There are so many things that I think about saying or that I come to understand so much later after this calling out has happened. But that's okay because it's a long learning process and you're not going to know everything at once and you're not going to know everything at the time when you need to call somebody out. But I think just that you do is enough. It's the first step.
I feel equipped, obviously, to talk about racism because as a Black woman, unfortunately, I've had to experience it in my life. But you can equip yourself to talk about racism, and everyone can speak on the matter and expose people. Everyone should be exposing racists, you know. And I've heard some white people say that they are uncomfortable and apprehensive to talk about racism because it's something that doesn't affect them. But you have to speak out on all situations of injustice, even if it doesn't affect you. It's just, you know, human decency to help you have to be actively anti-racist, as was said before in the previous video. It's not enough to not be racist. Being active is that exposing and calling people out, and you can do this in ways that is just non-confrontational and ways to educate.
When it comes to calling people out on their ignorance or their use of racial slurs or racially charged language, I find that we get very anxious. All of a sudden we get tense because, and this feeling is felt amongst a lot of people in the minority communities, because we don't want to come across as aggressive. We don't want to be seen as confrontational or problematic.
Really crucial when it comes to explaining to friends and family when you come across something racist, because often people sit back and think, oh, my family is like from the older generation, so that's just the way that they think, and their minds can't be changed because that's how they were brought up, and they're not going to change how they feel now, or they're not really racist, they're just saying it. But the thing is, everybody has to act in their little circles to bring about what little change they can.
I would recommend that you find a goal that you want to achieve by the end of the conversation. So do you want your parents to have listened to you properly? Do you want them to stop something that they are doing? Do you want them to act and do something? And when you have that goal, you can work your conversations towards that. And again, avoid being confrontational, because even though parents can be frustrating, when you say something like, no, you are wrong to somebody, and get very confrontational, it makes them feel less inclined to listen to you. So try and say things more like, this is harmful, what you said is unacceptable, and this is why, and asking them if they understand where you're coming from. And this approach can be taken with friends and colleagues, not just parents.
What we sometimes do is we can lack consistency in calling people out. So we might be comfortable enough to call out a stranger on their nonsense, but we can't do it to our own friends, our own family. And that lack of consistency is what allows racism to continue to exist. We have to be consistent. I always encourage people to be firm, but to be fair. But I stress firm. Be firm. If you're going to call somebody out on something, be prepared to do it again. And again. And again.
Cultural appropriation is the adoption or use of elements of one culture by members or a member of another culture. It is seen as offensive when elements of a minority culture are used by members of the cultural majority. This is seen as wrongful oppression and stripping it of its identity and intellectual property rights.
These ones are things like blackface. This is when somebody dresses up like a black person and paints themselves black. Obviously, because you're taking my skin colour and putting it on yourself in a form of humour, which is completely unacceptable. And things like, going to a party, a fancy dress party or something, and being dressed in traditional Native American attire. That's taking their culture and just using it for, your own entertainment. And people have been called out on these things. There was a time when, I don't know if people still do it, but people called cornrows Kim K braids because she had cornrows in and people really loved that. But the thing is, black people have been wearing cornrows for centuries. It's not Kim K braids, and there's a lot of history behind our hair.
When white people appropriate black hairstyles, they get praised for it. They don't, in most cases, they don't give the credit where it's due, and they're praised for something that black people are discriminated against.
There used to be laws called Tignon laws that made black women cover their hair because it was too flamboyant. We've had to suppress our culture and identity. So when a non-black person, especially a white person, wears our hairstyle because they think it looks cool and without understanding the history, it is upsetting because to you it's just fashion, but to us there's a stigma, and we have been made to feel inferior and unprofessional because of these hairstyles.
You have social institutions like work, like schools, who ban black hairstyles because of white cultural bias.
So, cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation are two very different things, but there is a very thin line between them. Cultural appreciation, it's literally that. You appreciate someone's culture. Cultural appreciation, no one has an issue with that. It's when it crosses over to cultural appropriation that there's an issue.
There was a Chinese fashion brand in a fashion show, I think it was 2020, and they put models on the catwalk with cornrows. That was appropriation. The reason that Black men and women make a big deal about hairstyles is that there's a lot of history behind that.
During slavery, a lot of Black women, Black people in general, would have to braid rice into their hair so that they could survive because they weren't getting fed properly. Slaves would braid the patterns of the cornfields into each other's hair so they could find their way around, so they could find escape routes. It's an integral part of my history. Sometimes people say that because a lot of Black people may have straight hair or they may have wigs, that means that we are appropriating white and non-Black culture. But you fail to consider the fact that our hair is not seen as what is acceptable.
Yeah, everywhere. I've seen it on campus. It's not even just cameras and dreadlocks. It may be wearing do-rags. For example, like I was in the business school on Streatham campus with my friend Panache, who's the vice president of the African Caribbean Society currently, and he wears a do-rag, and we was in the business school and we was having lunch, and we saw a group of white boys, and within that group there was one white boy who was wearing a do-rag. As soon as he saw Panache, made eye contact, he took his do-rag off. Now, obviously, that can be open up for interpretation, whatever. But what people need to understand is, especially white people, when you're going to appropriate Black practices, Black hairstyles, you might be thinking that, you're appreciating the culture and, you're inspired or whatever. But some people might take it as offensive. Some people might take it as, are you mocking me? So you need to be very careful on what and how you're doing it.
Jamie Oliver's jerk rice, I'm sure people have heard of that. He made a dish called jerk rice without using the traditional ingredients for a jerk marinade. So it wasn't jerk rice. He just took the name jerk and marketed it to, get sales, which was appropriation. It was his depiction, and that again was appropriation, because you cannot name something that it is not, because then you're not appreciating the culture and the history that comes with it if you don't use the actual recipe and ingredients.
Yes, it looks really cool. I mean, yeah, braids are really cool. I really like them. I really like my Afro hair. I like the dashiki that I'm wearing. I like a lot of these things, and I wear them because I'm Black. You can like them too, but to adopt them and to wear them as though you are a Black person, it's even if you don't mean it like that, you don't have to mean it in that way for it to come across that way. You can appreciate people who are different from you, and you don't have to be like them. You don't have to be like somebody for you to appreciate them or for you to respect them.
I think way forward is, you know, if you're going to do something that is appropriating another culture, if you think that it's going to like be deemed as offensive, just don't do it.
You can show your appreciation by calling people out on that. Educate your younger siblings, your children. Let them know that you need to be sensitive to other people, that your way of living is not the only way of living. You can do that monetarily by buying Black artists' music, buying Black authors, watching Black filmmakers' movies and TV shows. You can support them by speaking up about how much you do not appreciate racism, and that's how you can support people's cultures.
I was reading an article earlier by Margaret McKenty, and she states that I favour all of us exploring our ancestral performances where possible. But there is a difference between participating in Kaylee and commoditizing Brigadoon, but is less likely to join unwittingly when the latter is happening to someone else.
So when we talk about violence against Black people, we seem to only focus on the violence that Black men face. And there's Black cis women, there's Black trans women, there's Black LGBTQ people that are dying as well at the hands of white supremacy. Like, we can't forget the names that are Oluwatoyin Salawu. You can't forget Tony McDade, Giovanni Melton, Breonna Taylor, Belly Mujinga, Nina Pop. These are all important people that were murdered not only at the hands of police, but at the hands of other people in society who killed them because of homophobia, transphobia, racism. And these people mattered, and people who share these identities matter as well.
I hope that from this video, you have learned more about, how easy it is to call people out and what that means, and how it is so important to be exposing people and with the harmful things that are said and can be done. And hopefully you understood the differences between cultural appropriation and appreciation.